Welcome to the selfgrowth.com show. My name is David Riklan, and I'm the founder of selfgrowth.com. Today's show is about NLP, or Neuro Linguistic Programming. Today, I'm excited to interview John Valle. I want to give you a little bit of his background. He's a licensed master trainer of NLP and DHE who's been in the training and development field for over 30 years, and he's brought NLP and DHE into the business arena for just as long. He's the co-author with Richard Bandler of Persuasion Engineering. John is also a member of the Society of Neuro Linguistic Programming, the American Society of Training and Development, and is certified with the National Value Center. John is the president of the Society of Neuro Linguistic Programming and manages the international system of licensed trainers, as well as co-trains with Dr. Richard Bandler at most of his events, both US and internationally. John's going to be sharing a lot of information today about NLP and its applications, and he's going to be teaching us some NLP techniques to help us get started. John, welcome to the selfgrowth.com show.
Hey, David. Hey, thanks a lot. Good to be here.
All right. Very excited about this. We'll start light, and then we're going to delve in a little bit deeper. So, very simple question. What exactly is NLP, or Neuro Linguistic Programming?
And that's usually a difficult question to answer, but let me see if I can make it simple for you. It's basically how the brain works and with language, both verbal and nonverbal language. And so I guess an easy way to put it is if you pay attention to what people are saying and doing, you can learn a lot more about them. And then how you output information back to the person is often quite important. So basically, it's a simple technology. I think it's been a little bit overcomplicated over the years by other people, but it's not all that complicated whatsoever. And we're more interested in how the brain works as opposed to why things work. You know, why do people do what they do? It's much easier to go with the how they're doing things in their brain than it is to why are they doing things in their brain. And it's really quite simple.
All right, we're going to delve into it a little bit deeper. So about language, it sounds like some of the main things are really understanding language and understanding the kind of the input and what you're taking in and listening and output and what the best approaches to these are. But as we delve in a little bit deeper, I think people will get a sense of where it fits in and how it works. So what are some applications of NLP? You're developing skills in NLP. Where are you going to use it?
Okay, let me describe a little bit more about the technology first, and then you'll understand more, or people will understand more about the applications of it.
Okay.
If I could explain it easily, I say there are two parts to NLP. One is their basic skills that people ought to be able to develop. And these are basically things people haven't taught us in school. And there are quite a number of people who do these things really quite automatically anyway. Somehow they've learned them. Somehow they're really quite talented in all those things. So there's the basic technology called skills. And then there are combinations of those skills. And I would call those techniques, or other applications of NLP. But now, if I could explain it in a little bit different way, if I were to teach you how to bake a chocolate cake, you'd be able to bake one hell of a chocolate cake. But if someone came to you and said, "Oh, can you make me a pineapple upside down cake?" you may not know how to make a pineapple upside down cake. But if I teach you about ingredients and temperature, humidity, timing, and all these things that go into like baking something, anything.
Right.
And then taught you how to make a chocolate cake, if someone came to you and said to you, "Can you make me a pineapple upside down cake?" you're in a much better position to be able to do that because you've got the basic skills. It's really that simple.
All right, so it's starting with the skills, and if you understand the skills, it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you're applying it. So what are some of the areas, as you're developing these skills, what are some of the areas that you've seen people applying it to?
Okay. One of the basic and most important skills first is the ability to use what we would call your sensory acuity. That means means listening, seeing, not just hearing, but listening, observing people, so that you can determine what is going on when they're communicating with you. Okay. So you really have to know about then language, and our language evolves, by the way, so some of the things that may have worked in the past may not work the same way today because our language evolves. But those things are important to have, and they're very important to have as a skill set. That's just number one. once you have the ability to do those things, that's called input,
Mm-hmm.
then I'd go to the next step, or the next level, as some people would call it, and then teach you the intricacies of language. So there are categories, and I don't want to get too complicated with the technology and the labels of the technology. But there are categories in which we can teach people to sort for certain things in someone's language as they're speaking. And that would give us even more information about, how are they doing this in their brain. So those are the basic elements, So then you can even create your own applications, if you wanted to. I tell people the following thing, because a lot of people, you might notice out there, they latch onto the techniques, and that's okay, except for one thing. And I keep telling people this: the techniques work every single time until the first time they don't.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's because all of us as humans are basically what I would call, that we're so subjective that while the main things might work most of the time, there are going to be people coming along who are going to be doing things so much differently in their brain. And if you don't recognize that, you're not going to be able to help them. It's that simple.
That makes sense. What's interesting also is I like how you differentiate between hearing, which most people can hear, and listening. It's drastic.
Yeah.
You want to delve a
One of
little
my
bit more deeply into hearing
well,
versus listening?
Yeah, sure. One of my favorite things to say is it's really, it's so obvious, if someone having a conversation and the other person said, did you hear what I said? And I would say, I might say, yes, I heard you. And the other person might say, yeah, but were you actually listening? Hearing something and listening are two very different activities. Some people hear music and they don't really listen to music.
Sure.
Some people they listen to music, and some people hear music and they never hear what's going on in the music because they're not listening to the music. Same thing with visual, by the way. We can all look at one thing, and five of us could see something there that's different. So, it's the difference between looking at something and actually, or seeing something and actually looking at it.
Yeah, makes sense. It's comprehension. It's comprehending it, understanding it, and then being able to react to it.
Or even reading books.
Right.
I get people say, well, I read the books, so therefore that makes me qualified. I go, actually, it doesn't. Reading the books might help you to understand some things, but it doesn't help you to do those things.
Right. Okay.
So, reading a book and really understanding what's being read in there, diagram the senses, but they don't even do that anymore in schools. I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah, things have changed a lot and continue to change in our education system. So when I talk to people in the past and still currently about NLP, a lot of people think NLP as the techniques, and it's really much broader than isolated techniques. But I want to spend some time talking about it. And some of the techniques I hear people mentioning are things like anchoring or modeling or framing or mirroring, just to name a few. And NLP, the way I see it, is you reference focus on language, but it's a very broad umbrella of a system of skills that you're developing and techniques that you're applying. So relative to some of these techniques like anchoring, modeling, can you clarify for us what some of these techniques are and where they fit into the world of NLP?
Well, it's easy, actually. I start with anchoring. Anchoring, that goes back to the old Pavlovian thing, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog,
Right.
And then, ring the bell, don't feed the dog. And then I change it from there. I say, and the dog's going to bite you probably. But that's just the old stimulus response model. Now, it's been around forever. The difference is, at least in the NLP, we teach you how to do that purposefully. Okay, so there's a purpose for it. Now, I'm going to give you some just off the cuff examples. All right, you're driving down the street, you come to a red light. Hopefully, you stop, but you're not thinking about stopping. You don't consciously say, "Oh, the red light's red. Let me put my foot on the brake, take it off the accelerator." You don't do that. So you're already anchored to the red light.
Right.
Music. You could be listening to music and you have a favorite song of yours. When you hear that song, you get a certain feeling about that song. That's because you're already anchored to that song. Probably what happened was you were probably in a situation where you were having a good time, you felt good, and you heard the song. And that's a simple description of how that would get anchored. Now, the other side of that is that you might like a song that you've enjoyed for years and years, and all of a sudden you hate the song. And that could be for two different reasons. One is you heard it so much you no longer like it. Matter of fact, you hate the damn thing. Or you could have been in a very negative situation while that song went on. And now you're negatively anchored to that song. But anchoring is, I mean, it's been around forever and ever. You're probably anchored, you're anchored to your spouse is anchored to you in different ways. They can look at you in a certain way and it's going to be a great day. They can look at you another certain way and you think, uh-oh, what did I do now? But
Sure.
those are all already,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
and nobody purposefully anchors those, but intuitively people understand. They go, well, I know that if I look at this person this way, I'm going to get this response. Now that's all well and good, except there are a lot of anchors, for example, that are you probably wish you didn't have, or you wish the other person didn't have. But those can always be changed around. Because our brains are so pliable, we can change a lot of different things around. We can teach people how to do it for themselves. But that's anchoring, and we use anchoring because sometimes we want to typically anchor someone to a good feeling while they're doing something else, so that they'll enjoy doing that something else more. That's just an example of how we might use it. Modeling is a totally different thing. What most people think of today about modeling, and because a lot of people say, oh, can you teach me how to model? I can tell you this. Both Richard and John won't really teach people the depth at which you have to go in order to truly model, okay? Because there are some ramifications to it that you might not want to know about, or you might not want to take on for yourself. But the essence of modeling means this, okay? It means being able to understand enough so you're listening to someone's strategy for doing something. That's what most people are doing today. But you really couldn't build a model of something to teach other people, not really, unless you have taken that model on yourself and you can duplicate that behavior, as opposed to just talking about it or teaching it. And that's really an interesting point to take. Richard was a mathematician and a computer programmer back when he was younger, very, very
Right.
young.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was when he started modeling, and this is how they actually I got together these guys. And it's an interesting story. Was that Richard was able to duplicate behaviors, but he could not explain what he was doing. It was really quite simple. John, being a linguist, he understood modeling, and what he did was he was able to take what Richard was doing and describe it for Richard. But John would refuse to do that until he could duplicate the behaviors. That's quite an interesting thing. But what Richard would do is there are two things that I'm aware of. One is he would build mathematical equations, okay, or based on calculus, using different mathematical things, I guess is to put it, symbolic logic, all these different things like this, in order to build an equation in his brain. And then he would take the words, okay, and make them representative of the different mathematical, let's say, symbols, okay, and speak it. And to you and I, we would just hear sentences.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay? But in the meantime, what those sentences are doing are rearranging things in people's minds, whether they know it or not. I mean, I think that's quite fascinating. And so, and I don't know many people who can actually do that. Build mathematical equations in their brain. No. I roll my eyes around in my head when I hear about these things. But if you can duplicate someone else's behavior on how they're able to do something successfully, now you can say I modeled this person. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But basically, what most people are doing now is called strategy elicitation, and they're getting the basic elements of how the person does this one job, or let's say behavior thing. And then they teach other people about it. But to me, it's not true modeling. Modeling is based on mathematical equations, and then how you can duplicate those in your brain.
So let me step back on those two particular areas. So you're talking about anchoring and modeling. I want to delve a little bit deeper into both of those. So the way I see both of those is there's value in using them kind of on yourself. So you're changing how you behave. You're changing what you're capable of in terms of anchoring and modeling. And then a next step is to work with other people to help them change their behavior.
Right.
And I see both of those. Do you see, and in the broad world of NLP, one of those being more important, or both of those, or where do you see that fitting in terms of the framework of NLP?
Well, yeah. If I kick back to modeling, okay, so if I'm going to teach you anchoring, I ought to be able to use anchoring for me, and I'll be able to use anchoring for you, right? So I should go first, if you think about it, okay? So that way I can understand how anchoring works.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on me understanding how anchoring works, then I can help you. And first I can teach you I would first anchor you to something and then teach you how I did that. Okay. Because people say, well, if I can do this for myself, what do I need to go to somebody else and let them help me? So it's real simple. If you knew, there's a difference between what you're consciously aware of and what you're not aware of, and that's unconscious information. So if you consciously knew how to do this, you'd be doing it and your brain would be doing it. Okay. So once I teach you something, and then you're aware of how it works,
Mm-hmm.
you can go in and help yourself all you want, because
Right.
your brain will do it. And that goes with any technique. If someone came to me and said, gee, I worked with someone on this one technique, but it didn't work, I'm going to say, well, let me try, let's do it again. Okay. And let's see that it works. Right. Now, there's only a couple of possibilities there. One is the technique didn't work the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or the second one is the technique didn't work the first time. It's really that quite simple.
Right.
But it's all dependent upon the programmer. Okay. But once you know how to do something, I've taught people how to, and we don't even call it therapy. We call it education, because we're teaching people how to use their brain. It's what we're doing.
Makes sense.
Once I teach you how to use your brain, then I'm going to have you show me that you know how to use your brain. And I might even do that based on you doing it with someone else and me observing you. Okay. And then making some adjustments or whatever, because learning is learning. Nobody gets it perfectly the first time that I'm aware of. You might get lucky sometimes, but the first time is lucky, second time is lucky, and the third time is success, as far as I'm concerned. Keep it simple. So, but you ought to be able to do these things. How can you teach something that you can't do? That's very difficult. I understand.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. Hey, I understand there are baseball coaches that probably can't whack a ball out of the park, but they can certainly teach you how to do it.
Right.
And they do because they're in a different job. They're watching you from the outside, what you're doing, and they're just used to doing that. So they've got what I would call a highly developed skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So you ought to be able to do the things you want to teach. We do things in our seminars, and we demonstrate the techniques to people, so that we'll have someone come up into the front of the room on the stage, and we'll demonstrate how this works, basically how this works. And I say basically because then they're going to say, well, can I write down the procedure? And I say no, because I want you to first go try it out on your own, while you're in the room with us, so that we can all observe how you're doing. Because if I write down a recipe for them, then they think that's the recipe, really, quite simply. And the basic skills are the basic skills. Once you have the basic skills, how you apply those skills is going to be based on how you would apply those skills, based on you, the person. I don't expect anyone to do things exactly the same way I do them. That's for sure. But you ought to be able to learn anything for yourself. To me, you should go first.
All right. Well, let's delve a little bit deeper into a couple of other ones. So I mentioned, we talked about anchoring and modeling. I know two others that I hear a lot of people talk about when they're referencing NLP is framing and mirroring. Where do those fit in? What's the quick description of those and where those would fit in?
They're two different things, so they don't even go together really. But framing is if you want to keep the information you're going to talk about or discuss with somebody well focused. Okay. So, but now, unless you're talking about reframing, that's a little bit different. But framing by itself means let's put this in a frame and not go out of the box on this one, so you can get a better understanding of this one little item.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really framing is. We don't use the word framing so much ourselves. It's really like a marker to let people know. Let's keep this here. Let's not get out of the box. Let's not go out of off the rails here. And
okay.
Talk about something else, really.
The way to maintain focus on a particular subject, or whatever you're working on. So that's framing, and you mentioned reframing, which is another technique that I hear about. So reframing. So how do you describe reframing?
It's to take an issue of some sort and describe it in a different way so that the other person understands it. Real simple.
Is that something you would also use with yourself in terms of giving yourself a different perspective?
Well, here's the interesting part. If you had to use that for yourself, you've already done it before you've done it.
Okay.
Because you would already understand what it would take for you to understand it, and by you just figuring out what that is, you've already done it.
Okay, that makes sense.
How can I look at this differently is basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
How can I see this differently? How can I hear it differently? How can I make it make more sense for me? So absolutely, you can use it for yourself, but by the time you figure it out, you've already done it.
Right. That makes sense. You've already reframed. You already know that you needed to do it,
Right.
which is kind of the first step, understanding that you even need it, and then figuring out, all right, how am I going to do this? Makes sense.
One really simple example is I used the one when my son was young and he was in school. The teacher would say to me things like, well, he's a little wiry, kind of wily a little bit, and he wants to be the boss of everybody like that. And I said, wow, he's going to make a great leader one day or a great executive in some company, isn't he? Simple reframe,
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the teacher had to think about that. And she was a great lady, by the way. She did a fantastic job. But she had to think about it. And then she looked at me and goes, oh yeah, I guess that's
I
possible.
understand. Okay.
So,
I mentioned mirroring. What is mirroring? Let's take a quick look at that.
Sure. Mirroring, this comes back from some research from a little bit of years ago. One I'm aware of is probably back in, I don't know if it was the 60s or not. And if I recall the guy's name, it'd be even better. He noticed animals would match and mirror another animal's behavior. Okay, that was one. Now I'm sure it goes back to before this. Desmond was his name. Let me see. Was that the last? I think it was Desmond something or other. It's been a long time now, but anyway. So the basic element is this. Okay, if you notice people who are together, meaning they're in sync.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
right.
In a restaurant, for example, you could look at them and say, wow, they're matching each other's behavior. They're sitting the same way. They're nodding to each other. It means they're having a good conversation.
Okay. They're interacting, and I get it.
Yep. Now, if you look at another two people in a restaurant and they're totally mismatched, in other words, one's leaning forward and trying to get their point across, it would seem to me, and the other person's leaning back, not looking at them, they're doing all this kind of thing. Well, that's a mismatch. Something's not right here. There's something's wrong. Now that's just the physical looking at them with body language, with their body language. The same thing goes for their words, their language. What do they say? And are other people matching back their words? Here's an example for people to pay attention to. The worst thing you could say to someone is, I know what you mean. Okay. I mean, I'd probably say it myself, but it's not the best thing you could say to someone. If someone, worse than that is, I know how you feel. Okay. We all know the answer to that. No, you don't. But the point is this. So if you hear someone using certain words in their language, and you know that those are key words for them, they're markers because they mark them out a little bit, a little bit more change in their voice tone, or whatever. Or better yet, you're asking them, you're in a position of selling something, and they're using certain words. You wouldn't want to use those words back. You wouldn't want to repeat everything back, but you want to use those certain words back. Now, there's a reason for this, besides the fact that they're already using the words. It's because when they output the words, that synaptic trail is already built up. That cortical pathway is already lit. In other words, when you repeat the word back, it's going to go up that road. Mm-hmm. Some people want to change the words around, and they want to start a whole new thing. And that means the other person who's listening has to create a new pathway to figure out whether or not the person really understood them or not. And that's a no-no. Okay. Yeah, I've been involved in this for years and years and years. I had one experience once on a car lot. I was young, and I wanted to buy this car, the model of the car. I mispronounced the word of the car, but I pronounced it the way I thought it was pronounced. And the salesman basically corrected me with a sigh first. It's called this. And I said, oh, really? Very interesting. And I turned around and walked off the lot. But this is what people do in their minds anyway. They get turned off. Okay.
Of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, listen.
But you're first telling the person you don't understand. You have no clue what we're talking about.
And it was like this too. Yeah. I'm sorry to keep cutting you. I think there's a little bit of delay here between our interaction here. I think. So, for example, in persuasion engineering, okay, I mentioned the following thing. Okay, it goes like this. One of the biggest insults you can pay to someone is to paraphrase something back to them. Because basically, and we're taught to do this, okay? Rearrange everything and then give it back to the person so that they understand, they don't understand this, so that they are comfortable that you got it. And I go, that's not it, that's an insult. Because basically what you're saying to someone is, you didn't say it right. Let me tell you how you should have said it, okay? So instead of changing the words around, I tell people take the key words, and instead of what we call paraphrasing, I changed the words to parrot phrasing.
Okay.
Makes it easier to remember to do these things. So if you came to me and you said to me, listen, I'm looking for a new home, blah, 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 whatever. And, and I say, well, what do you want in your new home? And you say, listen, I need 3 bedrooms. I want 2 full baths. And then I repeat, and I want to repeat that back to you. So I'm going to move towards, I'm going to move forward in sale. What am I going to say to you? I'm supposed to say, so you need 3 places where people can sleep. And you also need 3, and 2 lavatories. And you're going to look at me like, you haven't heard a word I said.
Right.
Haven't heard a word I said. The biggest thing people don't do, the worst thing people don't do actually in their interactions is they don't demonstrate understanding. That doesn't mean you say, I understand. You demonstrate it, and that's another skill set that people have. Some of the best people in the world with influencing other people know how to do this. That's mirroring.
All right. What's interesting to me is all these techniques really focus on being able to understand and communicate. It's about understanding how you think, how people think, and to be able to communicate and interact appropriately with people. And that seems to be the core.
Yeah, it's so that everyone gets the result they want.
Mm-hmm.
And push, shove, all that stuff. And I know people still do it. They try some trickery, things like this. But people aren't that stupid, not really. It's whether or not then if they feel that it's not going in their direction, do they want to say something, or they have the courage to say something or not. That's the other part of what goes on. You and I could be having a discussion, and if you're not liking what I'm saying, and you just go along with my program, then there's a problem with that, right? So we're not going to reach a mutual end result. That's simple.
Now, I speak to a lot of people that use NLP in different walks of life, and they swear by the power of it for the 2 things, really, to impact who they are and how they communicate, and to gives them additional power in terms of working with people, communicating with people, with persuading people. And these are tools and skills that I think everybody needs virtually in every area of their life. And I know you really focus in terms of your training on 2 things. One, working with people to develop the skills for themselves. And then you also have kind of train the trainer programs where you teach people kind of the next level. All right, now that you've learned and understand NLP for yourself, how do you apply it? How can you teach others? Can you take a couple of minutes and talk about the specific programs that you have? And I know you do a lot of programs with Richard Bandler. So what are the programs you have, and then how can people find out more about them?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, we have some coming up, soon this year anyway, but we do this every summer. There's a basic skills program. It's called practitioner program.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a licensed practitioner program. Then the next level would be licensed master practitioner program. And I tell people all the time, I've gone to about 9 practitioner programs, at least maybe 6 master practitioner programs. That was before I decided to go out and be a trainer.
Right.
I really prefer people go out and get some practice. You can't, again, you've got to be able to output this information. Just having to be able to explain something isn't the same as doing something. Doing it. And then if they ultimately are prepared and ready for this, then the next step would be if they want to become a trainer. That program happens to be called charisma enhancement, because we do have people who come to that seminar. They don't care to be an NLP trainer. Listen, the market is flooded with people with NLP trainings.
Right.
I'm not going to go to the point of who's qualified, who's not, qualified, all these things, but the market's been flooded.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot of people who want to come and learn those basically platform skills, presentation skills that they can use regardless of what they're doing. They can use them on sales calls. They can use, some of them are public speakers. We get lawyers who come to our, charisma enhancement program because they want to learn how to present information better to the court, to the juries, and the judges. So it doesn't matter what they do. Like I said earlier on, you got a brain, you want to learn how to use it, and you want to do better than what you're doing, And so those are those programs. In the winter time, we have a series of 3. The first one is always persuasion engineering. That's a 3-day seminar.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the middle program, which I'll get back to in a moment. And then after the middle program, then it's charisma enhancement again. So trainer training, we get a lot of people interested. They come from around the world, by the way. We're in Orlando, but they come from around the world. But the middle program, then, see, I like to call that our wacky seminar, because it's the craziest one for people to have a great time and learn loads of stuff about themselves and for themselves. And they can also take some of those things and use them to help other people. The one we just passed is, we're going to do this again in February. It's called neurohypnotic repatterning. I'm not even sure how I can describe that whole thing. it's really a different level of taking people to where they can actually do even more of what they thought they could do. Gets into a little bit more about neuroplasticity,
Mm-hmm.
the brain stuff, neurochemistry, things like that. Not all real technical, but so that people understand there's more about what's going on inside, not just your brain, but your body. So we do that one. Sometimes another middle program might be the other favorite of people's is design human engineering, also called just DHE. And that's about going in. My wife loves to describe that as going inside and redecorating the interior of your brain. Yeah, it's really quite good. That's based on we started doing that 1990 or so, 91 maybe 89. I don't know. It's a long time ago. Richard, there's a couple of things that came out of great people like Tesla, and Tesla was an interesting character. He could build something on the outside, a machine on the outside, and build that machine on the inside of his brain. And he'd run the machine on the outside and run the machine on the inside. And when he stopped running the machine on the outside, he'd go in first and measure the inside. Okay, he'd take all the measurements. So he'd take measurements of the wear and tear, and they would match on the outside. I got to think about that. That's quite phenomenal.
That's interesting. He was way ahead of his time in a lot of things. That goes back a few years.
Way ahead of time. We wouldn't be having electric bills today if
yes.
But and I like to say this to people because one of the things in NLP, people say, well, the map is not the territory. Meaning when you look at a menu, that's not the meal, right? And I remind people of this, but I'm probably the only one who says it that I know of. That I say the map is not the territory, but when it comes to what we're doing with DHE, for example, the territory is the map.
The territory is the map.
Think about that. You're sitting in a chair right now. That chair didn't just appear.
Right.
Some guy thought about it in his brain, or woman, or somebody thought about it in their brain, designed it, and then had it built. Okay. So if someone designs a meal, okay, right, most of it starts in their brain before they decide they're going to put in this ingredient.
Yes.
Okay. So while the map is not the territory is the map. So what can you do in your brain first, and then incorporate that into what you do on a daily basis? It's quite an exercise if you think about that. I've had people, they come back and they design things inside their brain, and it's kind of scary. Some of them come back and they show me their designs. It looks like the inside of the Enterprise, the Star Trek Enterprise thing, except all updated. Okay.
All right. Well, they delve in deep. So you're really teaching people how to delve in a lot deeper into how their mind works and combine with language, because everything still ties back to language, because we think with language. So the real core is understanding the intricacies of how language works and how it impacts us, how it impacts other people. It sounds like a lot of these techniques are built around that.
Yeah, that's the prime thing, but that's going to be auditory, of course, the language thing, the internal dialogue. But there's also the visual part, there's the kinesthetic part, the emotions, the tactile sensations, all those things. So, but to me, I don't know, they called it, Richard named it Neuro Linguistic Programming. So that's the meat in the middle.
Right.
Is the language part, the linguistics thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, how can people, you mentioned a wide range of really training programs to get you started, train the trainer, the DHE. Where should people go to get more detail about it, to sign up for the programs, to get questions answered?
Two basic sites, really. One is purenlp.com, and that's mine. And then there's richardbandler.com.
Yep.
And of course, that's Richard, We're putting up lots and more materials, interviews and things like that on all these sites as we move along. We had to re-up our sites, so we did that. But that's where you get all the information of what's going on. So Richard's is, if Richard's doing a seminar in Spain somewhere, that might not be on our site, but it'll certainly be on Richard's, and we take care of Richard's site for him, so we know where everything's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to mention those again, it's www.purenlp.com and www.richardbandler.com.
Correct.
And for those who, we really didn't talk much about Richard, but Richard is the creator. Two people co-created NLP in its infancy. Richard is really one of the brains behind this. And I know, John, you worked very closely with Richard for many, many years. So if you're looking firsthand to find out kind of the core and someone who's taken these from its infancy and built these, John and Richard are the people to work with to do this.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. So any last words, thoughts for folks who are thinking? So a lot of people are listening to this that at different levels. So some people know about NLP already, and some people might have been through some level of training. Some people are just learning about it. Any final thoughts for people before we finish today on NLP and what they should do as a next step?
Come see us.
Okay.
There are books out there to read, read the books. There are other prop videotapes and all this stuff, or DVDs and things like that, but I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And I've helped myself a lot just from the beginning, and lots of other people. You can come and learn how to help yourself. If you want to get better results in your life, really check it out. Check out NLP, check out Neuro Linguistic Programming. It's something else. And if we were taught these things back when we were youngsters in grammar school, or even before that, it would have been a lot easier for us today, but we don't teach these things, unfortunately.
No, they don't. That's a whole nother topic.
I know.
What we need to do globally in terms of education and how we can teach. So these are techniques that would help people throughout their whole lives.
Sure.
Versus just information. It's understanding. It's, you mentioned and when we started the conversation, it's about developing skills, new skills that you can apply in a wide variety of areas of your life.
Right. Exactly. And then the only other thing I'd like to say is your site's been fantastic. I've known you for a long, long time. I think if I dig back, but I don't have my old CompuNerd emails and things, or whatever they were back then, I think I know you from just about when you were starting or just had started or something like that. Okay. And I hung in with you all these years because you guys do a fantastic job. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm throwing this in there for you because I mean it. I
appreciate it. Yeah, we've been working with each other from the 90s. So we're early on in terms of selfgrowth.com and what we've done.
Yep.
But John, thanks for your time. Greatly appreciated. Want to remind people, go to purenlp.com or richardbandler.com. Has a lot of information, phenomenal training course. He's been doing it for a long time. John and Richard are the people to work with if you want the best NLP training. There's a lot of different people that are out there promoting NLP. If you want to go right to the source for the people at best, purenlp.com, richardbandler.com. John, thank you very much for joining us. And I want to thank everybody for listening, and stay tuned. We have more shows to come. Looking forward to helping everybody improve their lives. Talk to everybody soon.
Great. Thanks, David.
You're welcome.